The Backup is where we talk about the most hard-hitting news of the week, as long as it's related to video games. No COVID talk here, unless the COVID vaccine rollout is being hampered because Microsoft bought exclusive rights to the vaccine for Game Pass. As usual, the Back Podcast is brought to you by hero pocketeer Tim from the Learn Programming Academy chat. Get your exclamation mark Tims out, because the Learn Programming Academy offers classes covering the entire range of programming that are easy to watch for all skill levels, and they're almost all $20 or less. Head to lpa.dev/backpocket to download the custom backpocket info guide on everything Tim has to offer and become the coding genius you didn't know you always were. Even though I know a lot of people in the chat right now in our community, we actually have a lot of coding geniuses.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say, if Tim is looking for people to expand his empire,
tutors, lecturers,
Nicrotex, yeah.
Yep.
Gus on the 2 days of every 2 months that he looks good, you can get him too. All right, let's jump into the news, guys, because a ton happened over the last week. We went through, there were some rough patches for news over the last week, and then it just, everything happened last week. We'll start it off with a big one, which is E3 is coming back as a digital-only event this year. There had been talk about what is going to happen to the future of E3, and we have got confirmation. Joe Screbbles from IGN writes, the Electronic Software Association has announced its plans for the first digital-only E3, which will include Nintendo and Xbox, but currently does not include Sony. Taking place from June 12th to June 15th, E3 2021 is confirmed to include appearances from Nintendo, Xbox, Capcom, Konami, Ubisoft, Take-Two Interactive, Warner Brothers Games, and Koch Media. Besides Sony, the other major missing companies include EA, Square Enix, Sega, Bandai Namco, Tencent, 505, and Activision Blizzard. The E3 website promises live press conferences and a 4-day-long video stream, and says the show will be a reimagined and hyper-engaged digital experience. Peter Burns. We saw this happen a lot last year, of these events going on live, but particularly PAX, I would think, is the first one that has this kind of format. Do you think that E3 will live on in this format? Is this a good direction for the show?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I think it's great to have like an E3 banner back, and have it's just going to be Nintendo Direct after Nintendo Direct. But I like having a time in the calendar year where games get celebrated in a really hardcore way beyond the relatively small gaming news media scene. E3 was always that thing that expanded games beyond the core people who were totally into it and understood everything about it. So it's kind of like, it was always this big boon for the industry to go like, hey, we're a thing, we're huge. Like, we don't have an Oscars, though we do have a video game awards now, but it's like, your parents don't know about the Video Game Awards.
Yeah.
But they may have heard of E3 because of it, this gaming mecca existed. And I think that this could be a cool way to keep it alive. So obviously PAX was a different kind of beast. It was very much like panels, and when it went online, it was very much just like streamed panels, and it felt a little bit disconnected. Everything felt a bit disconnected from the idea of a PAX, and PAX is so about being there. The worst part about E3 is being there, and the best part is all the games that get announced. So I think it's really cool that we get this season of like ridiculous amounts of announcements.
And Gus, we saw last year, Jeff Keighley kind of tried to take the mantle of E3 with the sort of Summer of Games situation, which was spread out over a longer period. Are you a fan of the new look E3?
Yeah, I think it's just something that's come out of the circumstances. Obviously, last year was shit, and this is something
just
that
generally overall last year.
Just in general, but it's like it's pushed E3 in the direction it probably needed to be going, albeit through a sort of terrible set of circumstances. Because, from, as Pete mentioned, like a personal perspective, and this is a very selfish perspective on how I've always seen E3. It's something I idolized at a young age that I wanted to go to because I thought it would be this fun festival of games, like boots on the ground kind of thing, and then being there as part of like Good Game and stuff, realizing that it's actually just the event itself is a bit of a bit of a mishmash of just like consumers and press who are there, but like everyone's getting the same information now through this digital age. At one point, we were working our hardest to get that information back to Australia and on screens, and now it's like you're getting it at the exact same time. So its relevance in terms of like needing to be a physical event that takes place, I think, was over 3 years, 4, probably longer. So this needed to happen. You had people like Nintendo and stuff stepping away. It's not breaking any news to see that they're finally following suit. And now they've got this, not as an excuse by any means, but like as a nice sort of way to say, right, this is how we've shifted. This is what it needs to become. Off the back of the idea that, like, wasn't it just announced that, like, in March or something, like, earlier this year, that they're like, E3 is cancelled, and they're like, oh, it's all over, everyone's pulling out, it's not going to happen, and now they've kind of pivoted to like, oh, it's still happening just as a digital event. So it's like, I find it strange that there was this time in between that they were like, it's all gone, E3 is dead, and now we're this. I just thought they would have announced this off the back of those original kind of speculations that the whole thing was never going to happen again.
Yeah, I think those speculations were like the physical go-to event is not happening, but you're right that it seems weird to not go, this is happening at the same time, but I'm just guessing that enough ducks weren't in enough rows for that.
You're right, like they hadn't signed all those names that they've listed off now, which again I find strange because like unless they're going to put this, I guess, through some official streaming channels and stuff, Nintendo joining the E3 digital event, I can't imagine is going to be anything more than them just allocating some of their trailers across versus like they're still holding I still assume they're going to hold their Nintendo Direct the same way they always have. So as I said, as Pete mentioned, it's just this kind of like this sort of month or couple of weeks around when everyone does drop all their videos at the same time, which is strange because it's strange to be competitive now. Or why would you want to do it at the same time? Is it just because the fever is around people talking about games at that point?
Yeah, I think it's the rising tide thing, right? It's like little like Bandai Namco titles make it into the spotlight because it's E3 where they drop a trailer or, Koch Media or something, and it's like, no idea what that is. Never heard of it. But it's sitting right next to Microsoft's massive like indie game announcement thing. So I saw it and now I'm aware of it. And people like that, like the smaller publishers get a lift like that. Even like Warner Brothers get a lift from something like that because they don't really have an outlet. They just are a publisher, and it's like, where do you put Batman if not in a Microsoft or a Sony press conference?
Yeah, I mean, do Warner Brothers have literally any games coming out this year that they can even talk about?
I know until E3.
But I definitely agree that, and I think that for me that's part of what Xbox here, because Xbox coming back is like. I assume the Nintendo thing will just be the direct plays within the stream for the event. But Xbox coming here, I think, is another one of those things of like Xbox going, hey, we're for all gamers. We are all games. We wrap up everything in Game Pass. This idea of like we're going to shine a spotlight on some titles that won't get attention. Sony have been out of E3 for a while, so it's not surprising to see at the moment they're not there as well. The same with EA. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what it's like. The only thing that I'm a little hesitant about, but I don't necessarily know how you handle it, is the idea of it being this 4-day long video stream. That pressure to actually produce 4 days worth of content. Whereas before, the thing about E3 is like you would have these live streams of press conferences. And then lots of other people did their own thing. And then those channels would just go back live for press conferences and that sort of thing. And the show floor was happening and you got content out of the show floor. But when you make stuff like to go on a live stream, there's just a certain level of like,
air. Yeah,
you're putting on 4 days worth of continuous shows as opposed to you're putting on these big press conferences and then you're just going offline until the next one. But I'm guessing they're doing it to make sure that the attention stays there and that.
And I wouldn't be surprised if come June we find out that like there's an IGN or GameSpot attached to this as well. and the in-between content is the same content that they always make, which is like during E3, the internet is live for 24 hours a day for 4 days anyway.
Yeah, it's like just spread across thousands
different
of channels.
Yeah,
and you're right.
So
someone
there
like
might be IGN interviewing the devs in between. And
you're
stuff.
right. IGN sit at E3 the last couple of years, like in a glass box in the middle of the show floor. So essentially, that's just them putting their studio in E3. They're probably, or them or someone similar will, I assume, do something like that where they just have those developers rolling through and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, that could be a really good opportunity to get content. You know, you got Giant Bomb and Kind of Funny, all these people who do shows live normally during E3, that they just get these time slots to be able to put on content, and yeah, that takes the pressure off. So yeah, look, I'm the same. Like I've seen some mixed reactions from games media, but I think games media hate E3 because it is such a slog. Like, it's just total work. But when you look at it from like a fan's perspective, you know that hype is very exciting. Like we're seeing on screen right now, Keanu Reeves walked out last.
Totally. Do you think Microsoft are now like, hey, does anyone want to buy a theater that we've bought next to the convention center that we're never going to use again?
100%. They should loop it into Game Pass, and part of your subscription is you can allocate a time to just turn up to that theater and do whatever you want. Like, it's just part of the $10 a month. That'd be great.
Dolphin Pants in the chat is onto something as well, though. We should bid for a spot in that broadcast.
We totally should.
The back podcast, mate. Give us a day. Give us a whole day.
America is going to be asleep when we're awake.
That's true.
We'll fill that time. That's totally fine. We'll figure out who to talk to. Someone call my uncle who works at Nintendo. All right, let's move on to the next one. Sony not turning up at E3. Sony dropping the bag when it comes to that. Also, potentially dropping the bag for one of their bigger exclusive titles, because last week it was confirmed that MLB The Show is not only coming out on Xbox, it's coming out on Game Pass. And this is because MLB published this game and not PlayStation. Wesley LeBlanc from IGN writes, Major League Baseball, otherwise known as MLB, is behind the decision to bring Sony San Diego's MLB The Show 21 to Xbox, according to PlayStation. This news comes by way of Inverse, who spoke to PlayStation about the decision to bring MLB The Show 21 to Game Pass. The upcoming installment in the franchise is coming to Xbox for the first time ever after being exclusive to PlayStation since 2006. Not only is the show coming to Xbox when it releases on April 20th, but it's also launching day and date on Xbox Game Pass, which has an audience of 18 million subscribers. MLB The Show, a game that doesn't necessarily get a huge amount of traction here in Australia, but is pretty huge in the States, a really big exclusive for Sony traditionally, and is one of those sort of system sellers where you go, well, you got to buy a PlayStation if you love a good baseball game. And this is a pretty huge get for Microsoft, taking an iconic PlayStation franchise and putting it on Game Pass. Pete, is this Sony dropping the ball or Xbox just opening up the wallet?
Oh, hey, God, hey. That is a great segue.
Baseball pun.
I don't think it's them dropping the ball. I think it's just I think it's MLB seeing a huge opportunity to probably, I would say, at least double their audience, right? Like if it's on Game Pass for PC and Xbox, right? This is, like you say, it's a console mover, but it's a console mover for a niche.
Yeah.
Where I would play a Madden or a cricket game or something like that. I'm not going to go and buy a console to play that, but I like to play them every now and then. And to have a game like this available on Game Pass, I think it's going to triple the amount of people that install this and play it. And that's going to play a great thing for publishers.
I knew Nick you'd mentioned this. Just looks so your bag now, like in terms of that.
But I would never buy it. Like, I would never go out and spend $100 on the PlayStation 5 version of it because I'm not that passionate about it. But I will definitely give it a shot on Game Pass.
So apparently it's Xbox Game Pass for console only, which is a smaller audience, but it's still like a no-brainer for a publisher to get their game onto Game Pass in any way, because we're like the stats of that platform are that, you know, people are playing games 40% more and that kind of stuff. So it's like, dude, I would never get this, but I would absolutely play it on Game Pass. So very cool.
It's interesting as well for a well-established sport franchise as well, or sporting games in general. Like, I've found my love of them comes from just dipping my toe in the water. I know, Nick, you had a similar experience with Madden back in the day. It was sort of like, would I ever be interested in American football? And then you played it through Pocket and realized you had a real love for the gameplay. I know you follow it outside of that as well. And I think, like, yeah, Major League Baseball is one that I look at and I think this looks fun as a game. I can't really think, is there any other like competing series the way you've got FIFA and PES and stuff? Like, I think they are the main
this is the major licensed video game. There's a Super Mega Baseball or something, and then there's also one
Mario
other one
baseball.
There's a much more niche one, but in terms of like 2K have been out of the baseball game for ages. This is the baseball game. Yeah,
these guys are they're the big hitters, and so essentially for people who want to try this out, I also imagine like being a Sony exclusive before this. Am I right in saying that like baseball's huge in Japan, and I wonder whether or not so this is now getting that corner of the market, but your traditional American, larger player base as well.
All 3 Japanese Xbox consoles are going to have this installed for sure.
It's so interesting because, like I said, I'm definitely going to give it a shot now, and I'm actually really excited about it. But it's not that Sony have necessarily done anything wrong in this scenario, but it's another one of those things where you just go death by a thousand cuts. And I was watching Kind of Funny last week, and I liked the way that they framed it, where they basically said it's not about is this hurting Sony. It's more about like, when does Sony get the W? Like, when does Sony get a big win in the same way that Xbox seem to keep getting wins? So it's not so much that Sony are doing things wrong. It's just like, where is the thing that's like, oh, this is the PlayStation moment for something like this? Because I think that like, if I was Xbox and Microsoft, who just have a bottomless pit of money, there's almost no amount of money that I wouldn't throw at this just for the optics of going, we have taken an exclusive game from the PlayStation that's not only published exclusively on PlayStation, but it is developed by a Sony studio. It is published by Major League Baseball, but it is developed by a Sony studio. And we're going to take that game, and now we have it as well. The fact that you're going to have I also saw there was a great article, I think it was on Vice Games or something, where they were talking about they changed the color scheme. That MLB The Show traditionally always had this blue color scheme, and now the logo for the game is like this teal, and teal is a mix of green and blue, and it's basically like, so that no matter what game logo you have on the top of it, it's going to look good with that. So it's just it's little things like that where you just go, wow, you like the mind share of people going, oh, this is now available on Game Pass. This seems like a huge hit to Sony. And particularly when you go, do you want to play the game for $10 a month, or do you want to buy, $100 here in Australia?
Do you want to get a PlayStation 5 so you can buy it again? To play on that console exclusively? No. You're right. Yeah. I'm gonna dabble in this too because it's on Game Pass. I'm gonna watch Moneyball and then I'm gonna play this.
The thing that I would say in Sony's defense is that, I mean, they have been over the last generation and a half now, or generation, I guess, been really conservative, and they've been the dominant console in the West. Yep. So they've kind of played a bit of hardball and kind of been seen as almost the bad guys at the front. Yeah. Like with being like really conservative about like crossplay and all that kind of stuff with Rocket League initially, and all those things that are just like, Sony doesn't want to play with the other consoles. I think they've seen huge success with putting their exclusive titles onto Steam, after 12 months. And I think they're probably just really slowly looking at how to make money outside of their console as well. And, getting like millions and millions of dollars through Steam is not a bad way to go. And if they can, turn some of their titles into profit on other platforms like the Xbox, then it's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think we'll ever see The Last of Us on Game Pass, but I think because they published that. But I think they're looking at ways to make money off platform. So, we might see a little bit more of this going ahead, Sony driven as opposed to other publisher driven.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about it later when we get to the Last of Us news. But I think you're definitely right that the Sony or the PlayStation, I guess, that we're seeing now is different than the PlayStation at the beginning of the PS4 era, where it was sort of Sean Layden at the head there and was really making pretty big swings, being not reckless but quite ambitious when it came to like what they want to do with the PlayStation brand. And that over the last few years we've seen Sony take on a more Japanese business role again, which is that conservative nature, which is sort of like trying to cultivate a bit of a walled garden, not making big splashy moves, just returning to base, I guess, a little bit. And it is interesting seeing how that stuff is starting to trickle down now, because it is the kind of thing that takes years for these sort of things to show, in the same way it took years for Microsoft to... They've been working on Game Pass for years. These deals they've been putting together for years, but it's only been in the last 12 months that we've kind of gone, oh, wow, Microsoft are really killing it now. And for years it was like, what are Microsoft doing? It was like, this is what they were doing behind the scenes. Yeah. And it's kind of, we're now seeing Sony have sort of turtled up a little bit and are focusing more on kind of like, I guess kind of back to that PlayStation 3 era of like, you need to get a second job to buy this console. And
you can't buy this console.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of messaging is just this more conservative elite messaging, and it's not necessarily bad. It's just a change from what we saw during PlayStation 4, where they just were so dominant. Yeah. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. A game that you can play on most platforms, and it's coming out in May. So once you've done with the show, you can jump into the Mass Effect Remaster, and it's actually getting pretty big changes, particularly to the first game. On the EA website, the BioWare devs posted a blog outlining some of the updates coming to the Mass Effect Remaster, saying, ever since we announced Mass Effect Legendary Edition on N7 Day and revealed a first look at it earlier this year, your passion and excitement have blown us away. Today, we'd like to give you more details on what you can expect to see in this remaster, and they go on to talk about combat specifically. Combat in the Mass Effect trilogy has evolved across the series, with each game's experience being different. We wanted to make the experience better across the board, but we didn't want to unnecessarily change what our fans have come to love about each game. That proved a unique challenge, as the first game is quite different from the second and third in terms of gameplay and combat. And for those of you who didn't play the first Mass Effect, the way the combat in the first Mass Effect worked was, it was like a D&D dice roll behind the scenes. So even if you were aiming at someone's head, when you shot, there was this statistical chance that you would absolutely miss your shot because of this sort of dice roll in the background. And so it was more role play than necessarily like a straight up third person shooter. So they talk about Mass Effect was heavily influenced by traditional RPG mechanics like the randomness of a dice roll, and as a result, weapons in Mass Effect often felt less accurate and reliable than gunplay in Mass Effect 2 and 3. So Gus, they're changing the Mako, the handling on that. They're changing the weapons, that sort of thing. Do you like this idea of, beyond just a polish of the first title, they are bringing it in line with the series, so that the lessons they learned as they went through are going to give us a more cohesive package?
Yeah, massively. Like it. Pun intended again. But they evolved this series quite literally over 3 games. So for them to have different feeling mechanics when you go back to play them from square one, I think is very awkward. And I think that. First and foremost, with that weapon rework to make it feel more like a reactive shooter of what the third game was, it reminded me that the first game did really feel kind of like the next game from BioWare after one of like kind of your KOTORs and that sort of thing, where back then, playing both the KOTOR games, Knights of the Old Republic, is that the combat was kind of almost 50-50 between melee and range shooting, because you had lightsabers and you had those like... not one of those like the saber swords. No, they're like the metal, the vibroblades. And so you had your characters doing those sort of like AoE jump attacks, which the dice rolls make sense for that because you're not in control of that. But then you had characters with blasters kind of with terrible accuracy firing around. So that felt appropriate for that dice roll. Like, did I hit? Did I not hit? But predominantly when you're playing Mass Effect, almost every weapon is a ranged rifle, gun, scope. So to then translate that not RNG, but that kind of dice roll mechanic to all projectile weapons does feel strange. And I think we were just overwhelmed. Like, we were enjoying the Mass Effect series in the first game to let that slide, but by the second and third one, it was like, I'm holding a gun. I know how guns perform in other games. If I put a reticle over a head, I want that headshot. So yeah, this makes total sense. And I was watching this footage earlier, and I think if I went back and played one and didn't know that they were doing this, I would probably not have missed it. I don't think I would have. I don't remember a lot of one, but I specifically don't remember being that sort of like frustration over the shooting. But I think I would if it was still there, I would be frustrated playing it now. So I'm glad they've gone back and done that.
It makes sense. Are you keen for Mass Effect?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And this is the IGN comparison video with a bunch of dev interviews and stuff. So if you're interested at all in the remaster, definitely check out this video because it's got heaps of dev input on why they've made decisions and where. I think it would be cool to play the old dice roll stuff. Like, I loved Morrowind and stuff as well, which same thing. It's like it's a stat-based roll on a hit. But I think it is the right choice for titles that are coming out as a package that they all feel pretty congruent rather than being like the jump from 1 to 2 being this weird warp of headspace on how to play this thing. All of the changes that they've made to 1 seem to be quality of life, which is great. They have tweaked the Mako, which some people are like, no, everyone knows the Mako in Mass Effect 1 was a disaster to drive, but you mastered it and that made you feel good. Like that you had somehow like taken control of this unwieldy beast.
Or you ignored it completely like I did, I think. Like, I only did it on the 2 missions you made, and I ignored every planet that I had to drive it around.
Yeah, look, I'm very excited to jump back in and play these games. And, like, they've still got the lift rides in there and stuff like that. But I think they've made them, like, according to this video, a lift ride is 14 seconds as opposed to 54. And I don't remember them feeling like they were a minute long because there was always dialogue when you hopped in. Like, there was always a little back and forth or a news chatter or something like that. They did a good job of like hiding the loading in that way. Now they don't need to. So I'm worried we're going to lose some of that, like, the fun banter between characters, but I'm sure it's still all in there.
Also, a minute's enough time to go and make a tea. Get a tea versus 14 seconds is just, I'll come back.
Yeah. But I'm sure that's 14 seconds of dialogue. But yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah.
Nikki,
I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this. Like, I can't remember if I said this on stream last week at some point, but I looked up, because I played all 3 Mass Effects. I love them. I looked up how long they are, and they're not that long. It's like 50 hours to do everything in each game. Yeah, so like you can play all 3 of the games and complete everything in them in the same time it takes you to play Persona 5 Royal. So it's like you could just smash through. Well, not smash through. It's still 150 hours. But yeah, I'm so excited. I think it's really interesting. Like you said, there's so many quality of life things. They've done things like all weapons can be used by any class now, which wasn't something you could do before. They've reduced Medigel usage, cooldowns and stuff. You can use it more often. You can carry your character across from each one without having to rebuild the character creator and that sort of thing. So they've unified all the options, whereas in the first to second to third, they kept adding new options. So like you said, because you're putting it out as a package, that feeling of these all being the continuation of basically one game spread across 3 titles. And I do think, even though Mass Effect is the third one is one of those titles that is held up as an example of, or there is controversy, I guess, around the ending where you go, should they have stuck to their guns and gone, this is the ending we wanted to put, and then people complained, and so they came in and retconned, was that the right move to make? I do think that them implementing these changes, particularly from 1 and 2, show that when they made 2, which I think is the best one, they looked at all the stuff that happened in 1 and go, oh, this is actually stuff we want to change. Like, if they really loved the combat system, they probably would have kept the combat system for 2 and 3. Whereas it feels like they didn't. They did adapt it back then, and so now it's about bringing this first game in line with it. So it's almost like an artist going back to a piece of work and going, you know what, here's actually the lessons we've learned since then, not we're changing this just for the sake of changing something, or we're changing it to bring it in line with modern games. It's bringing it in line with the other games that they wish this is what they had done with 1, potentially. Obviously, like, I have no inside knowledge, but yeah, I'm just getting more and more excited about this coming out. And as I was watching gameplay footage, I was just remembering how I just completely fell into the world of these games, and I'm really hoping that they still hold up. I think they probably will, particularly from a story basis. But I just adored them, and we are going to be seeing more gameplay this week. Apparently, that this week they're focusing on giving more information about the look of the game and how they've remastered graphically and visually. So there's more Mass Effect news coming out.
And you're right, it's been long enough that, like, I'm trying to recall. I remember sort of story beats, but I don't recall a majority of the actual narrative outside of those main things. And most of it is hung up in the 3rd game. So I'm enjoying it just for the narrative perspective to go back and actually, like, re-encounter these storylines that I have almost entirely forgotten.
Oh, so much of this is, like, I just remember liking it. I don't remember what it was. I just go, oh, I liked it. So I will be surprised by 75% of the plot twists.
I think the thing that we need to be a little bit cautious of is the story and the gameplay are excellent, and they drive the series. But there's a lot of, like, knee-high wall, like, cover-based shooting, and the areas are pretty forgettable and samey. There's some exceptions to that rule, but I remember it, like, I remember not remembering most of a mission at the end of the mission because it was just, like, pretty bland and generic. There was a lot of that Paint, which is a new planet kind of stuff.
You're right. There's a lot of that. That's where we needed to go. And you just look down this large sort of winding corridor, and you're like, oh. And as you walk through it, a lot of doors open, a lot of lifts open, a lot of drop ships come in, and then you have to go back on the way back, and you turn around, and you're like, it's the same thing all again.
That might be where it feels tedious, but the story pulls you through for sure.
Yeah, that is one of my pet peeves in video games, when you come into an area and you go, I can tell that this is designed to be fought in, even though technically all of the game kind of is, because that's why I'm playing this game. It's like when you walk in, you go, no architect would actually put this many things breaking the flow of a walkway. And so it's like, oh God, I know what's going to happen here. Yeah. What we didn't know was going to happen was a little independent game that is exclusive for PlayStation 5 would be wrapped up in such controversy that people think it's a Kojima title. A story from Michael McWhirter from Polygon says that Danish developer Blue Box Games, announced its PlayStation 5 exclusive, a first-person survival horror shooter named Abandoned, on Wednesday via Sony's PlayStation blog. Almost immediately, PlayStation fans came to a conclusion about its teaser trailer that this is secretly a Hideo Kojima game. Enough people thought that the studio was forced to address speculation that Abandoned was a stealth announcement for something else entirely, and to deny Kojima's involvement on its website. From Blue Box's statement, quote, "We have received several emails regarding the Hideo Kojima rumor. We have no association with Hideo Kojima, nor do we claim to have any association, nor was it our intention to claim such a statement. We are a small group of developers working on a passionate title we wanted to work on for a long time. We've been assisting other studios in the past with their projects, and we wanted to work on our very first big project. While it is true that we've been working on small projects in the past, we certainly didn't use that for marketing purposes. We hope this has clarified this matter and hope to see you all in our very first gameplay reveal of Abandoned."
We'll see you all on the beach.
This was just the strangest thing. I mean, a few things came together on this. The weirdness of the teaser trailer, the fact that their website, it was like a studio that no one had heard of. Their website was weird and didn't really point to any like proper previous work. They were like a support studio for a lot of other things. But is this the kind of pressure that an independent game needs?
Absolutely.
It is. They're going to thrive under this.
Absolutely. They can only do well from this, and not have hundreds of thousands of angry, disappointed PlayStation fans going like, "I thought you were a Kojima game." What a weird conclusion to draw as well from such
strange.
little evidence.
Yeah.
Just the fever of the gamosphere, I think, got whipped up here, and that's a shame. But maybe this game got more attention than it was going to get because of that, and once expectations are reset, they'll see some positive benefits from it.
It's good that this has come out as a news story for their sake as well, in the sense that it blew up in a way that's given them a heap of publicity, or that's just brought a lot of attention to a game that might have flown under the radar. I love that the idea that there is just this kind of like Kojima owns moody, snowy grey skies now. If it's an obscure kind of like haunting looking autumnal forest, it's like Kojima game. And in this case, it's probably done them some good in the fact that like now they have some attention. I will say I saw the thumbnail for this trailer and jumped into it thinking, oh, this is going to be another one of these first PS5 like super hyper realistic games that looks amazing, because those sort of stills or moving stills of the forest do look almost lifelike. But there's minimal happening on the screen at any one time. So I got excited, survival game, all that kind of stuff. Not so much the Kojima side, but I was like, this looks great. And there's smoke at the end of the trailer that just looks like a plug-in that I was like, oh no. And then the thumbnail for the trailer itself is the gun in a hand walking, which then is like, they're tacked on to the very end of the video almost as a way of like, they didn't know how to put a thumbnail on, so they just added that vision at the end of the trailer so they could make that the thumbnail in the actual thing. I know that's not the case, but it just felt like suddenly you saw the cracks and it being a slightly more indie budget title. But again, I wish them all the best and hope that this is something that gets them, I don't know, gets the fire under their feet and it turns into an interesting game. Maybe Kojima might just come and consult.
Yeah, right. It's interesting. I don't want to. The game could be great. I don't know anything about them. I feel like this was if I was them, I would not have been happy about anything. Even though, like, we all now know the name of this game, and so that's a plus. But like this teaser is terrible. And it actually, what it feels like to me is more like the studio were just like, this is our first game that we're working on. We just want to make something to sort of prove to everybody that we know that we're working on something. Like we just want to put something out so that it motivates us a little bit. And then suddenly it got international worldwide attention. And it's like, it's like a bad voiceover and it's just constant shots of a forest. And I'm just like, this is not what you would want as your first global exposure of your title, potentially.
And this hand barely even looks like Guillermo del Toro's hand.
I know. It's definitely not Matt Nicholson.
Bad rendering.
Yeah. So it's it's interesting. We can only hope that it goes well for them. I think that any publicity is good publicity, and if the game turns out great, then this is the first step of a very fun story for them. But it is just so strange that people were like, this is a Kojima thing. Because also it's not weird enough to be a Kojima thing. It feels like a student film thing. And Kojima's stuff feels like student film, but with a huge budget. So it's just
and no
less
editor.
flaming whales,
not even a student editor.
Yeah,
it was far too short for a Kojima trailer as well. So that's
and it didn't say
his
a
name
trailer by
everywhere.
Hideo Kojima cut by Hideo Kojima.
And so that PlayStation 5 exclusive is not a Kojima game. That's probably because Kojima's next game could be a Microsoft title. Jeff Grubb from GameSpeak last week broke the news that Kojima is in talks with Microsoft about publishing his next game, according to a source familiar with the matter. Grubb went on to say, I cannot confirm if Xbox closed the deal yet, but my understanding is that Kojima is the focus of a Microsoft plan to leverage Japanese talent. Grubb then was in the chat of the aforementioned Kind of Funny News Daily last week, and he said at that point that the deal is apparently with the lawyers right now. The report also suggests that the potential deal has been in the works for several weeks already, stating that Xbox chief Phil Spencer deliberately featured a statue of the Kojima Productions company mascot in the background of a recent stream as a hint towards the partnership. Spencer has previously denied reports that Xbox is turning its attention to the Japan region, which has historically underperformed in comparison to PlayStation. Gus, you love yourself a Kojima game.
I do. I'm now a bigger Kojima fan than ever after Death Stranding, the game you should both play and is wonderful. What was on his shelf behind? Like the
it's the Kojima Productions.
it's the Moon
figurine.
Man thing. Yes, right. It's that one there. Yeah, I mean, this is just another. I hate to say it, another big hit for Microsoft. Going like they're
If
really.
it happens.
If it happens, yeah. Just as you mentioned before in the MLB story, just like really some of those backdoor sort of deals happening, and like seeing the progression of where it's turning into possibly a game now. Yeah, this excites me. I mean, I'd be sad to see the PlayStation lose some of that kind of like, that's where I go to play my like 3 games a year, or the PlayStation previously was where I'd go and play like an exclusive.
Where you
like
go to play three games a year?
It used to be like Last Guardian, Death Stranding, and I'm trying to think of the third
there's always
one.
3 third-person action games that are like, cool.
Yeah.
that have been rumored about for years.
Yeah.
And The Last of Us part, that kind of thing. So that had some kind of special era for me. But yeah, I mean, I don't see why Kojima wouldn't do this. I mean, I can't see if in those talks there's been any talk of like exclusivity. So I feel like this is just the ability to broaden that audience and bring more people to play some of his weird, strange visions. So I think that's a good thing at the end of the day. But I would probably still play it on a PlayStation just out of nostalgia's sake, but that's just me being weird.
For me, it's like, perusing through Game Pass and stuff like that. I noticed there is a distinct lack of really fucking boring games. So if a Death Stranding came to it, that would be
Ouch. Great. I mean, we're also talking as someone who like famously had the run up to his games extends for like 5 years at a time kind of thing. So what we're looking at here is the negotiations of the game being developed for a platform. Whether we see something in the next year, let alone 5, I would be very surprised.
I mean, it is interesting. Like you said, there's no it's talking about Microsoft publishing the next title, which hints towards an exclusive deal. But also the idea that is this something that Microsoft, that Kojima is making with Microsoft money, or Microsoft are just like responsible for the rollout of it? Because when he left Konami and they stopped sort of like being under a PlayStation umbrella, I think there's probably also a lot of freedom that came with that, and that he is the kind of person that even, it's such a strong vision, all of his titles that he makes, and they've performed well. So I think he continues to earn the right to be able to make whatever it is that he wants. But
even as a fan, he's pushing it.
Yeah, but I wonder, Death Stranding was the first title that he made outside of, the first like recently outside of Konami. I wonder if he would be that quick to jump back into like a relationship with a big publisher, in that way, where suddenly you are working for someone again, as opposed to just like, hey, you're going to throw some extra dollars my way, but it's still my game, I can do whatever I want, and at the end of this I'm going to decide what I do next,
or at least to get the
like
promise
as much
of that freedom.
Shade as I throw at Kojima, that's what I would want to see. Like, let the man be himself, because he is insane and he's making games that no one else could even start to think of. So like, he made a effectively AAA game around being a courier in a like some kind of goth apocalypse. Like,
I mean,
crazy.
This Death Stranding stuff looks way more interesting to me than all the stuff that I played, which was the ladders. I wish that I hadn't fallen off it, and there seems to be a pretty heavy sentiment in the chat as well of people going, I wish I kept playing this game, but
it's worth it.
I just gave up. I'm always there for the story stuff, but yeah, I don't know. All this stuff is making me think maybe I should go back and give it another shot.
Back on what you were saying,
it's a lot of ladders, dude. It's a lot of ladders.
And also bad story and bad storytelling. It's like every time I got to a beat of story, it was like, this was not worth the effort I just went through.
Well, it's kind of like it's like, I think Kojima's thing is always amazing ideas executed like storytelling wise poorly. Like bad storytelling with awesome ideas.
None of my affection for this game lies in these cutscenes and these characters. It's within the moments between that, which you are experiencing the game and the world and kind of injecting some of your own logic and sort of story and character into what you're playing. And that's, for me, the moments that were really groundbreaking and really amazing. And I'm sure that was intentional, but I don't think that was the reasons for such bad story writing, was to be like, it's the moments in between these terrible acts that you'll really enjoy. So, but like you said, Pete, like I feel he's, more than anyone in the games industry, earned his right to be as strange and obscure with his titles. I think Microsoft would be silly to feel like they could rein in that creativity in any way, but you never know how things go once, you know, where that money is coming from. There is always the buck stops with them, or could if they went ahead. So I think he would be cautious. They should know what they're getting into, buying into a Kojima game. And in this kind of like era of fans having their say, or people being loyal to a brand or something they really enjoy, I think Microsoft is smarter to know that they wouldn't mess with his vision if that's how this all goes.
Yeah, and I can't see Phil Spencer making a huge mistake like trying to rein in Kojima.
Totally.
He's too savvy.
They're just they're both such lovely people, though, too. They'd be so polite to each other.
Yeah. and if you're going to do that, bring in literally any other developer who's going to, like, you don't bring in someone like Kojima and go, I'm going to tell you what to do, because then why are you getting Kojima? He would be, I imagine he would be incredibly difficult to work with unless you just let him do whatever he wants. So, like, why open yourself up to that? But Sony don't necessarily need new games, guys, because the massive news from the end of last week is that Sony are remaking one of their old games, and that game is The Last of Us. And then the second half of the story, which we will get to, is that they are also not going to be making Days Gone 2. So big news from the end of last week. Joe Scrabbles from IGN writes that Sony Studios are reportedly working on a remake of The Last of Us, while Sony Bend begins work on a new game after an unsuccessful 29 pitch to make Days Gone 2. So this all came from a Bloomberg report by Jason Schreier into the dissatisfaction among Sony's lesser-known studios. Sources say that a Last of Us remake codenamed T1X was started by Michael Mumbauer, the founder of Visual Arts Service Group, who were a Sony developer that traditionally kind of assist on development of PlayStation Studio games. Mumbauer apparently assembled a new 30-strong development group, and after originally passing on the idea of a remake of the first Uncharted game, settled on a remake of 2013's The Last of Us. However, the team reportedly ran into trouble after Sony kept their existence a secret and refused to offer extra budget. Head of PlayStation Studios Herman Holst apparently deemed the project too expensive, and Mumbauer's team was then moved off this T1X Last of Us remake and onto support development for The Last of Us 2. But according to Bloomberg sources, after The Last of Us 2 was completed, Sony moved multiple Naughty Dog developers onto the T1X project along with Mumbauer and that original team, and the remake effectively became a Naughty Dog project. So the devs who worked on the original title sort of come into this new studio, and then suddenly they have a lot more control over what's going on. Mumbauer and the other original developers have now left the company, but development on the remake is apparently still continuing. So let's start with this, and then we'll get on to the Days Gone thing. But Gus, is this
a waste of money?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Let's start there. Is this a waste of money? Is this something that you want? Is this a good idea?
No, I don't think it's a good idea at all. I think this game exists as an incredible, sort of high watermark of game production of the tech that it had at the time. I think, its combination of writing, performance, and, as I said, what it could push the hardware to do, we saw in the remaster. Like, it's been remastered. It exists. I think that is totally playable. I played maybe 4 hours of it in the lead up to Last of Us Part 2, and it was totally serviceable, and I can't imagine what a remake would bring to this outside of just the level of graphic fidelity we saw in The Last of Us Part 2, which was wonderful, don't get me wrong. It's like, but it's kind of like The Last of Us Part 2 also raised the bar for so much that this series brings, that is the game that I want to play if I want to replay any of The Last of Us. I know it's a very different story. But yeah, I found that remaster totally serviceable. So why would they spend time on this? I don't know. Yeah, I don't see myself interested in seeing shinier skin and more paws on all these characters, because like I don't know, either of you, can you think of something they would be potentially bringing to this?
The only thing, like, Last of Us 1 and 2 are close to perfect games, but they're not perfect games, and like, maybe some of the movement and gunplay and stuff could be improved, but I don't think that makes it a better game, because the game isn't about that. It's about a relationship between two characters. And like, I don't know, it just feels totally unnecessary. And when like you talk about maybe making Uncharted 1 again, it's like, yeah, okay, it's older. It could do with a facelift. It would, like, imagine playing it in the new engine, with all the things that Naughty Dog have learned between then and now. But Uncharted 1 is just like, is a worse version of what they did with Nathan Drake and all those characters as well. It's like, they've come so far. Why look back when these people are making, particularly putting Naughty Dog energy into it? It's like, let them do the next thing that's going to change the gaming storytelling, not go 100%. Back and work on a thing that was revolutionary 10 years ago.
And there's only so many things you can change. If you did that Uncharted 1 remake, like you said, and you tightened the weapons and you fixed up the character models, you're still going to have sections like we talked about with Mass Effect, which are just, I remember, areas of jungle with just knee-high walls throughout it all. Like, is that remake going to change some of that core, like,
well, yeah,
structure?
They could get rid of that, but does that make it a better game? No.
No, but it also, like
yes, but not worth playing again.
No, exactly, yeah. Sorry,
I think that I think that this is an example of that conservative Sony stuff that we were talking about before. I think that they've crunched the numbers on this and they've gone, we will put X amount of money into this. When we put this game out, we will most likely put this game out in conjunction with the HBO TV series of The Last of Us. That series is going to open up in the same way that The Witcher 3 saw an enormous spike of people going and playing that game and playing that game for the first time, so therefore buying that game after The Witcher TV series aired on Netflix. I think we're going to see the same thing with The Last of Us. There are going to be a ton of people who are like, oh, I'd never heard of this. This is cool. Oh, I have a PlayStation because I play Madden or whatever. Are you going to go sort of hunt down this like old game that doesn't look as good as the second one? You're not going to start playing the second one. They're probably going to put out a package that has both of these games together, or at least like sell this one standalone in conjunction with the second one. And then they're going to just go, okay, we're going to have X amount of millions of people are guaranteed to buy this game. I think a ton of gamers will still just buy this game because it'll be like, it'll basically look like The Last of Us 2, but be The Last of Us 1. And I think I get that from a business decision. I totally understand that. But just from, again, a feeling of going, this feels for the people, I guess it's that thing of like, as someone who is obsessed with video games and who spends their entire life talking about video games and playing video games, I feel like all video games should be made for me. And not people who have never played a game before. And so I kind of go, this feels like, you guys said, a waste of time, a waste of effort of people that could be doing something else, but also just like a bit cynical, I suppose, of going, we're gonna put this out. This is literally just a money thing, and it's coming, and it also it's. I did see some discussion happening last week about what this does with Naughty Dog, and I love Naughty Dog games. I love Naughty Dog as a developer, but it is like Naughty Dog are now Sony. Like they are basically PlayStation, and the continual rise of Naughty Dog in terms of like whatever Naughty Dog want to do, it seems like Naughty Dog are going to be able to do. Is that damaging or not for PlayStation in the long run? Because I guess moving to the second part of this story and saying that in the same report, Schreier was talking about that Sony Bend had pitched a sequel to Days Gone after the game's release in 2019, but that was rejected. Sony then moved Bend developers onto two Naughty Dog projects. So there was the multiplayer game, which is presumably the standalone Last of Us multiplayer game, and also a potential new Uncharted project as well. Some Bend staff reportedly left as a result of having their autonomy taken away, and leadership allegedly complained to Sony and asked to be moved off Uncharted development. Sony Bend is now apparently working on a new original game, but it's not clear if this Days Gone 2 a brand new game or they've returned to another back catalog game. So I think again it's that thing of like Days Gone was not a game that particularly hit with me. I don't think it wasn't the massive hit that they were hoping it would be, but I know a lot of people ended up playing and going, if you strip back some of this open world stuff, there is a cool story here. There's a lot of potential here. In the same way that Uncharted, the first Uncharted, had a lot of potential, and we saw where that series went. If you invest in, okay, let's see what this looks like if it's expanded out a bit more, what happens? And like I said, I'm not a massive Days Gone fan, but I would be more keen to see what could Days Gone 2 be than moving those developers and going, okay, you're just now Naughty Dog support staff, and you're going to like work on The Last of Us multiplayer or a remake of The Last of Us or whatever. And that it just seems like philosophically PlayStation seem to be narrowing their focus
creatively too. Yeah, in the way that it's, as you said, they're making these decisions based on marketing spend. Like you mentioned, that's a good point about all the Last of Us stuff to do with the HBO series. Like, are they going to rely on people sifting their way through, even at the front of the PlayStation store with Last of Us Remastered? It's not going to sit as nice as this brand new shiny, convincing people it's a new game at the front of their store, and to make that decision to put those creative developers onto it for that reason, rather than say, hey, really run with your skill set here and make something new. And then to do that, as you said, there's potential in Days Gone. Like, it's an interesting game, and actually it's not an interesting game, but it's creatively, it does a lot that it stretches really far, and there would have been a heap of talent on that team that to now be, you're right, reined in to be making decisions based purely on like, here's what we know will work versus let's really hit for the fences and see if we can do something creatively new. It's unsettling because it's like, yeah, you do want to have these moments where you're seeing trailers of games that you did not expect to come out versus the remastered, the remake, the safe bets, all those sort of things as well, even if they are grey, brown, apocalyptic kind of paletted games.
And I think that it's like Uncharted is one of my favorite game series of all time, so I would happily take. There was talk about whether it would be Uncharted 5, basically, or if it would be and in that case it would be taking on I don't want to spoil the end of Uncharted 4, even though it's
a new character,
but a new character introduced at the end of that, continuing that story, or a prequel in some way to the Uncharted series. And so I would happily take either of those. But also, like you said, I would also like to see new things coming out, and the idea of I think it's hard when something you go. You can argue about whether or not games are art, but certainly from a consumer perspective, they're supposed to be entertainment and something to be enjoyed and played. And it's hard sometimes when you see the business side of that coming up and you go, oh, this is actually just like a really clear-cut business decision that we've crunched the numbers and we think that, if it is the TV show thing, we're just going to sell a bunch of copies of this. And so that's now what we're going to put out, where it's like most of the time you think that things are put out because we think this will be a fun thing to do.
And you run into the same thing with the Uncharted film coming out as well. Like, is that a reason that they are pouring attention back into that franchise versus this is where this franchise should be going creatively? Because as someone's mentioned in the chat, there was a prequel on Vita. There's flashbacks in previous ones. Like, they're stretching that canvas of what they can tell in that universe as much as I love it as well. So whether it is a decision based on the fact that the popularity spikes because of the film, that's unsettling compared to this story needs to be told.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see. Oh, sorry, Pete.
Does any story need to be told, though? Like, as long as it's entertaining and good for like a fun ride, then I'm okay with it. Like, I'd be totally cool with a prequel series of Uncharted games that have a younger Drake doing young Drake things, Tom Holland style. But
totally. I really liked Golden Abyss. Like, I thought that was an awesome Vita game, even though it's seen as like lesser Uncharted.
But I think that's the Vita's fault. Totally.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a shame to lose a Days Gone 2 to that, because it's very much about giving games with potential another crack at the spotlight. The thing that I think is like hard for me to pull together is this idea of making a Last of Us remake for people who have seen the TV show, who haven't necessarily played the game. It's like, I think anyone who is a gamer who is then interested is totally fine with the remaster. So are they going to make like a story mode, and then what's the point of a story mode version of a game, or like, spin it into a Telltale style narrative focused game and strip out all the bad parts of The Last of Us, which is the gunplay, and make it a different game. But then you're getting that story told in cinematic form anyway. So what's the point of that?
I think it's just there to get a new tile on the storefront. Like, I'm kind of like convinced for what Nick was bringing up about that series.
The cynicism of it all, yeah. Anyway.
And also, I think that I think that it is. I didn't play it when it came out. I played the remaster, and I thought the remaster was really good. But if you put the remaster and 2 up against one another, you go, it's night and day compared to how they look. Totally. And so if and that this series might come out in a year or two, and by that point, like, everything's next gen. The games that people like, if someone buys a PlayStation 5 and they're playing games that are like Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man and that sort of thing, going back to something like the remaster might not be as appealing, and also it's not going to cost nearly as much money to make this as it would to make the game from scratch. So they've just hit that equation. I did see, the last thing I'll say on this, I did see a terrifying proposal, which I don't think will happen, but someone did put forth the idea that they would retcon the characters to be Pedro Pascal and the girl playing Ellie. They would basically change the faces so that it's interesting, it's just like the TV show, which I think they would not do because those characters are too iconic. And they are characters. They're not like superheroes where that people like inherit the cape or the mantle or whatever,
and
like through
they
generations.
Could revoice, and they could do a lot to try and tie that in.
But at the same
with the
time,
eyes of a cynic.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Eyes of a cynic. That's an easy thumbnl to sell on the PlayStation Store for the people who never played The Last of Us.
And it's less of a jump for people to to go like, oh right, that looks exactly like the thing for the thing. There they are.
I'm okay with that as long as it's a toggleable option with like a DK mode and like a paintball mode or something. Like, it needs to be a silly series of things that you can add on, and just it's not the selling point of the game.
So we'll see what happens with that. And then the final story, just rounding us out, a very quick one, but to add to the delays coming out this year, it broke last week that not good for Gus's fantasy picks for the 2021 Back Pocket Fantasy Draft. DeathLoop has been delayed to September, which is pretty surprising because this game, they went pretty hard on the marketing push over the last couple of months, and it was due out in 5 weeks' time. In a statement on Twitter, Arcane Leon said, "We've made the decision to delay the launch of Deathloop to September 14, 2021. We've committed to quality and preserving our team's ambitions for Deathloop while ensuring the health and safety of everyone at Arcane. We'll be using this extra time to accomplish our goal, create a fun, stylish, and mind-bending player experience. We apologize for the extended wait, and thank you all for your passion and excitement. It is the fuel that powers our creativity and our hard work. We can't wait to show you more Deathloop soon." Gus, it's still coming out this year apparently, but a 4-month delay is a pretty big delay.
It's quite sizable, especially when they're saying it is due to sort of, safety for workers, COVID, all that kind of stuff. These things have been around since they've been announcing those previous launch dates. So whether or not this, I'm not saying there's any, I don't think they're bullshitting, but I just think it's like there's probably other things they have to iron out as well. And they've just kind of gone, that's a good umbrella to wrap it up under. Personally, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I still watch the trailers. I'm really looking forward to playing this, but I still kind of don't fully understand the concept of how it works, and part of me worries that there's a few people going, does this work yet? And concerned about the time looping, the Groundhog Dayness. They're like, what have we made? And like, 4 more months, we'll just sort it out, because you loop back.
I mean, it's so true.
You're dead.
There is that adage of video games that like it all comes together in the last 10% of development of going like that's when the game becomes fun, and that would be hilarious if they're all looking at it going, wait, I don't quite understand what I'm supposed to be doing in this.
Gary, you're the lead developer. Yeah, I still don't quite get it. We're looping.
My cynical side is like, there's something to do with the Microsoft takeover here. It's like, it's got to run better on Xbox than it does on PlayStation.
Interesting.
So
that's a good point.
Let's put some more time into optimizing it really hard for the architecture of the Series X, and
so that can be a story when
it launches, Digital Foundry do it, and it's
14
not a
frames a second on PS5.
Like, there's a couple more frame dips in the Xbox version than there are in the PlayStation version, because it's just the headline cycle of that stuff is just so detrimental to video games.
Totally.
Digital Foundry are excellent, but also the worst thing to have ever happened.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's like fascinating the work that they do, and I think they're brilliant. But it's the weight that people then put on that of going like I can never tell if something runs 7 frames better on one console than another. Like I can't tell the difference. I can barely tell the difference between 1440p and 4K. So it's just they're things that just.
And you're right, it affects the audience in a way, or the consumer in a way that goes like, oh, once I've heard that, seen that headline, I've seen that YouTube video, that's enough for me not to buy that game. It's like, as you're right, you could have played it and never noticed and been totally okay with it, but now you're on this little high horse about it.
You can't enjoy it, though, if it's running, like if there's a single frame dip every 30 seconds because of some render technique.
Yeah, how will I loop my death?
The one thing, Gus, I'm with you of like, and I think most people are of like, still not quite sure how this game works, but I'm intrigued. I am worried that I hope in the 4 months between now and September, or next month in September, they go pretty quiet on the marketing because their marketing campaign had definitely, like, this is a last minute thing because their marketing campaign was definitely a ramp up to release campaign where they were doing a ton of videos explaining things. And if they continue that, I do feel there could be a point where it gets like, I kind of stop caring about this game because I'm kind of inundated. Everything. Yeah, I've seen everything, and also you have set an expectation in my mind. Like this is one of those games that is like the best version of what this is you see a couple of trailers and go, what is that? And then you play it and you are surprised by it.
It's a discovery process, versus
expecting a ton of stuff going into it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm just worried about. The next 4 months will be like, we need to keep this hype train going. It's like, no, you really don't. Like,
totally.
You need to go quiet and just.
There is the idea of like sort of the novelty becomes fatiguing in a sense that you're thinking, this game is going to be so interesting. It's going to do such an interesting spin on shooters and that kind of stuff. And then if the more time that just lies in wait, the more you get your expectations up, and it can't deliver on it. Versus, to have that all happen in game as a discovery process can really add to your enjoyment of it. So I'm with you. I'd like them to just basically sit tight and just be confident in it. They had that recent video where you're right, the developer came out and tried to explain it in a fun way, and that was great. But I'm still a little lost. I'm like, you know what? Leave it there. I'm happy to just
totally
find that out.
Let me just figure it out when I play it. Exactly.
Totally.
All right. That is literally all the video game news